Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Believe in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots. And right now, I get to welcome back to the show a very good friend, Dr. Eric Eager, who's the vice president of Sumner Sports. And of course, you can go to sumersports.com to find out a lot of the interesting data analytics that Eric and Thomas Dimitroff, the former general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, are working on. First of all, Eric, how you doing today?
Solly, it's great to talk to you again, and miss getting to hang out with you in Cincinnati and all the great times we had at PFF and all that.
Absolutely. But it's all, I feel like I'm always going to learn something when I'm hanging out with you. So we got to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, it's a disappointing year because, once Joe Burrow was lost, a lot of people thought the season was going to go down with it. But I have to give these players a lot of credit because I think they took it and extended the season further than maybe many of us thought. We had hoped that maybe we could still punch a ticket to the playoffs, but it was not to be. They were eliminated on Sunday as a result of losing their most recent game. I can tell you right now, we were all kind of disappointed when they went out to Kansas City and took an L there. But what did you see from this team? What comes to mind as you reassess what you saw in 2023 from the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's just a lot of great individual performances. Trey Hendrickson, a great free agent signing a couple of years ago, continues to play great football. One of the league leaders in sacks. When you look at Mike Hilton, another great season for him. Obviously, T. Higgins, who struggled with injuries much of the season, continue to make great plays. Against Pittsburgh, against Minnesota. Obviously had the injuries, coming down the stretch. Same with Jamar Chase. It was a tough season, I think, for a lot of players. Near the end of the year, but there were a lot of great individual performances that kind of buoyed the team. And of course, Jake Browning, for much of the season down the stretch, was one of the reasons the team was able to sort of keep afloat in a tough AFC. I think one of the reasons why many of the fans thought that the season was over when Burrow went down was because this AFC, the Browns being one of those teams, obviously the Ravens in their own division, even the Steelers now, a team that has an opportunity to win double-digit games. This is a tough conference. And so when Joe Burrow, one of the best players in the entire league, went down, I think many people believed this season was over. Credit to the Bengals, credit to Zach Taylor. There was, a lot of really good individual performances that kept this team alive. It just wasn't enough, of course, but it was enough to keep this team, in contention all the way until the second to last week of the season.
Yeah, and when you talk about the AFC North division, the Bengals win on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns. They still finish above 500, and you will have all four teams within that division finishing with a record at 500 or better, and potentially three going into the playoffs. I think it's a testament to just how good the teams are in the AFC North division. I want to go back and talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. I think when we saw this offseason that they were losing both of their starting safeties, Vaughn Bell and Jesse Bates, to free agency, I don't know that any of us saw that there would be this kind of drop-off. It's been significant, whether it's in the communication, whether it's in the number of explosive plays allowed defensively. What were maybe your thoughts then when you heard of the news that they were leaving the team, and what has since been, after looking at the data of the defense, what has been your conclusions?
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, as far as, explosive plays allowed, you look at chunk plays of 20 yards or more in the passing game, only Tampa Bay has allowed more plays of 20 yards or more in the passing game. Ironically, a Pittsburgh Steelers team that is probably going to make the playoffs because Baltimore is resting their starters on Saturday, is third most in the NFL. But Cincinnati has given up 63 such plays this year. That's tough to look at, and obviously when you look at Bates in Atlanta, that has been a really good defensive turnaround there. That's been tough, right? And you look at Kansas City, who's been a team on Sunday who's had a really hard time getting explosive plays. They got out of their slump on Sunday. A big play to Rashee Rice, of course, over the top to really help that team. So that's been tough. And losing DJ Reader even on the defensive line, they've had a lot of explosive run plays on Sunday against Kansas City, against them as well. So that's really been tough for Cincinnati. They've been sixth most in the NFL in giving up runs of 15 or more in the run game. So it's just been something where you look at Lou Anarumo's defense. I look back at like the 2021 AFC Championship game in Kansas City, where they play back, they only rush three, they play back and sort of dare a team to go 5 yards at a time, and it really was the ingredient that kind of put them in the Super Bowl that year, put them in contention for the AFC Championship game the next year, and that's kind of betrayed them this year defensively. And it really, I think, is a product of losing that franchise player in Jesse Bates, and it's been the thing that's really hurt them this year defensively.
Yeah, and look, Lou Anarumo's defenses. I thought his game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs in previous years really almost served as a blueprint for other teams and how to defend that offense, how to play against Patrick Mahomes, force them to be more patient, right, more incremental when going down the field. It seemed to be working for a lot of other teams, but now the Bengals are having to get back to maybe restructuring their roster. I know you do a lot of work with roster building and roster construction. Cincinnati Bengals could potentially lose a player like a T. Higgins or even a Joe Mixon. They are going to have to make some decisions with Jonah Williams at the right tackle position as well. What are you seeing in terms of some of the really essential needs as the Bengals look to rebuild and retool this offseason?
Well, and that's so hard, right? Because Joe Burrow obviously is, got the big contract. I think he's deserving of it. He's one of the top, 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, I think, pretty easily. But that's the hard part. I mean, Patrick Mahomes last season was the first quarterback in NFL history to win a Super Bowl when making more than 14% of a team's salary cap, right? So that's the uphill battle that the Cincinnati Bengals have. And Jamar Chase is going to be worthy of a big contract as well. And you saw, what did the Kansas City Chiefs have to do when to win that Super Bowl? They had to trade Tyreek Hill, right? And the Bengals are going to have to let T. Higgins go. Well, you look at Kansas City, how much of a slog it is for them offensively now that they don't have that big receiver. It's going to be a little harder, and Joe Burrow is going to have to make more with less now that he's making that big money. And so it's probably going to have to, be on the shoulders of Zach Taylor to be more creative. They're probably going to have to go into the draft and find wide receiver talent in the later rounds. They're going to have to do more. Now, guys like Tanner Hudson are going to have to, be tight ends that are going to be, plus players at lower salaries in the later rounds. They're going to have to, guys like Chase Brown are going to have to, be the Jerick McKinnon types if you're going to look to Kansas City and look at kind of like how they were able to, Jerick McKinnon during the Chiefs Super Bowl run, he had 9 touchdowns last year. They're going to have to get that kind of production out of Brown. You're probably not going to have, going to be able to pay a guy like Joe Mixon $12 million out of the backfield as a running back. You're going to have to probably be a little skimpier at right tackle, with Orlando Brown making the kind of money he's making at left tackle. So to me, it's going to have to be, incumbent on Joe Burrow to be able to elevate the play of those around him. And that's really the hallmark when you think about quarterbacks, back to, Joe Montana, back to, Tom Brady. It's the hallmark of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, all about elevating the play of those around them, because those guys are worth all that money, but they have to be able to make do with players who are making less money around them because of the salary cap structure of the league.
And here's the multi-million-dollar question. I want to present it to you because I think it's going to be a topic of conversation immediately once we move into the offseason. Will the Cincinnati Bengals use the franchise tag to retain the services of T. Higgins? And is it even affordable?
I think they can. The question is will they, and could they use the franchise tag to eventually trade him? I think that all 3 of those options, letting him go, franchise tagging and trading him, and franchise tagging him to play him one more year, are all on the table. I think that the one that probably isn't on the table is franchise tagging him to sign him long term. I just think the economics of it, when you think about Burrow where he is at his dollar amount, Chase where he is at his dollar amount, I mean that's a $30 million wide receiver. Higgins is a $25 million receiver at his. So when you add it all up, those guys are probably going to be $110 million between them in a $240-ish million salary cap. that's 100. That's 40% of that, right?
Yeah.
In three players, it's hard to build a roster where three players are making almost half of your salary cap in a league where you put 22 starters on the field. So I just don't think the economics make sense there.
We were talking about the AFC North division, potentially three teams could get into the playoffs. As we sit here at the time of this recording, the Pittsburgh Steelers already have their 9 wins. So another winning season for Mike Tomlin in his 17 seasons as an NFL head coach and the coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And going into Sunday's game, the Cincinnati Bengals, if they fall to Cleveland, they could end up 0-6 in the division. Now, we can chalk some of that up to no Joe Burrow, right? But I think that's significant. If you're Duke Tobin and if you're Zach Taylor, how are you looking at your ability to really compete within the division as you move forward? And how does that play in your roster construction? What does that say about this Cincinnati Bengals football team as we currently see it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think almost the exact opposite was true just a few years ago. With the exception of Cleveland, Cleveland has always given Cincinnati some troubles. With the exception of late last year with the Browns. But yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think the one big thing that's always been a problem is the offensive front for Cincinnati. With Cleveland being so good, especially defensively up front with Myles Garrett, Darius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, guys like that. And that's the thing when you're the Cincinnati Bengals, and just a few short years ago you were 2-14, and 2 years later you're in the Super Bowl. It's almost impossible to rebuild the roster from A to Z, perfectly. So they got really good in the defensive backfield. They got really good in the defensive front with Hubbard and Hendrickson. They got really good at the wide receiver position, and obviously at the quarterback. The offensive line has been the slowest thing to go. I think if the Bengals really want to compete and go from 0-6 to 6-0 in the division, they really have to sturdy up that offensive front. And it wasn't for lack of trying, obviously. Jonah Williams, the first-round pick. Orlando Brown, they went with Lyle Collins, of course. They Ted Karras. They really tried. They just have to continue to try on that offensive front and throw numbers at that position, and eventually it'll hit, I think, for them. But that's really where, in my opinion, they got to continue to try, because the Pittsburgh is going to continue to kill it up front with Highsmith and Watts, and obviously the Baltimore Ravens hit with Clowney and Way and guys like that. So to me, if the Bengals want to consistently win in that AFC North, they're going to have to eventually get 5 solid starters up front on that offensive line.
Yeah, you're talking about 3 teams that the Bengals are facing within that division can all put pressure on the opposing quarterback with great regularity. The Cleveland Browns, the Baltimore Ravens, where they rank very high in terms of pressure, sacks, and their ability to turn you over on the back end. And so all 3 of those teams, whether it's Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or Baltimore, they can get after your quarterback. And I think it really, for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's about protecting Joe Burrow at all costs. Want to continue now to sort of take a look around the National Football League. I got to tell you, Eric, almost everywhere I'm turning and every ear to the ground is echoing shades of Bill Belichick's 24-year run in New England potentially coming to an end, that this could be his last game as the head coach of the New England Patriots as they get ready to take on the New York Jets this weekend. What are you hearing? And is there any way, shape, or form that he returns as the general manager and head coach of the Patriots next year?
Yeah, and as you know, my boss Thomas Mitroff, he was part of that Patriot paradigm for all those years. Won 2 Super Bowl rings. With Belichick. Went to another one. Was part of that 17-0 team in 2007. I think that it's funny. Everybody who says, "Oh, can Bill coach anymore? Can he still do it?" It's like, well, I don't know. Could Tony Dungy still coach in 2002 with Tampa Bay? Of course he could, right? He went to Indianapolis and won a Super Bowl after. Could Andy Reid still coach in 2012 with the Eagles? Of course he could. He's gone on to win multiple Super Bowls with the Chiefs. It's like Belichick can, of course, still coach, but sometimes you need a change of scenery. And I think That might be the case for Bill in New England, and it's almost sacrilegious to think about him somewhere else. But maybe that's the ultimate end of the road for him. But you think about the Chargers with Justin Herbert, that might be a perfect destination for him. Washington might look, with Josh Harris and that new ownership group might be looking. You think about that franchise. They once had Vince Lombardi at the end of his run as a head coach. Obviously, Carolina is looking for some stability after a number of kind of embarrassing, runs at it with head coaches. You think about even could Dallas possibly want another coach after a number of playoff misses, with Mike McCarthy there? I think there are a number of ways it could go for Bill Belichick. And frankly, you look at that defense, and I know the offense has been really, really disappointing this year, but that defense, you look week in and week out,
Tip top.
They gave Buffalo a run for their money last week. He can still coach defense. And if you gave him a quarterback like Justin Herbert, for example, I think that there are still probably Super Bowls in his future if you gave him the right quarterback.
See, I'm not questioning Coach Belichick as a coach at all. He can coach either side of the ball. He can take either area of a football team, and you spend a week with him, he's going to make you better. As a general manager, I think that's where the questions are. I think even for Bob Kraft, who I think really cherish having Bill Belichick as his head coach and running his organization for the last 24 years. But I was reading somewhere that since 2013, not one of their first three picks, whether it's first, second, or third round, was able to get a second contract with the Patriots. In other words, they move on to other teams. So even by that metric, they weren't worthy of really saying that, this was the right pick for us long term, because they moved off those players when it came time to give them a second contract. In your world, as you're evaluating moves like that, particularly in the draft and in free agency, what does that say about the job done as a general manager?
Yeah, and and that's the thing. It's like a lot of times, we look at the Richard Seymour trade. We look at the Lawyer Malloy when he moved off of him and then won the Super Bowl. We look at a lot of shrewd moves that he made personnel wise, and a lot of those are a decade old.
Yeah.
And we look at a lot of the moves that he made as a coach, and they're moves as a coach. And I do think it's important for us to look at kind of evaluating the moves that he made and looking at them with a sober eye and saying, yeah, we probably should think about whether or not he's more of a coach than a personnel person. Yeah, for sure. Because it has been a long time since as an evaluator, they've made plus moves in that building.
Yeah. And then the drafting of Mac Jones when he was selected looked like a great move by the time we got through his rookie campaign. However, over the last 2 years, the development has not come to fruition into the point where he's benched multiple times during the 2023 season. And as we get here now, going into the final regular season game, Bailey Zappi has replaced Mac Jones. So a lot of question marks there as a talent evaluator and particularly as the general manager. I want to ask you about the Harbaugh brothers, both Jim and John Harbaugh, who once again, Eric, they're at the epicenter, right, of the football universe. You got to go all the way back to 2012 when both Jim and John Harbaugh were coaching the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers. They met in the Super Bowl. I remember their dad, Jack Harbaugh, at that game. I was there the night the lights went out at the Super Bowl. But once again, these guys just continue to win. No, in Jim's case, whether it's at Stanford, whether it's with the San Francisco 49ers, whether it's now with Michigan, where his team is 14-0, proving that this guy can coach. And then you've got John Harbaugh, whose team now have the number one seed in the AFC for the second time in franchise history. He has repeatedly done it, and he's done it with different style of quarterbacks, right? And it's not lost on me that he got his brother's offensive coordinator in Greg Roman. When Greg Roman left the 49ers, Greg brought that offense. I know he's no longer there, but remember, Colin Kaepernick played for Jim Harbaugh. And then it forced, I think, John Harbaugh to think about offense a little differently. Maybe I can go get one of those in the form of Lamar Jackson. So these guys, they have shown some versatility, some creativity, but yet they still have some old school tenets to what they do as coaches.
Yeah, and even Mike McDonald, who's the defensive coordinator, with the Ravens right now, who's doing a masterful job with Patrick Queen, who everybody thought was a bust as a first-round pick coming out of LSU. Obviously, Roquan Smith, who was a good linebacker for the Bears, but not this all-world linebacker that he's now for the Ravens. Mike McDonald, was the lowly linebackers coach for the Ravens, went to Michigan, got that defense into the college football playoff, came back to Baltimore as the DC. Now has everybody talking about the Baltimore Ravens. He's probably going to be a head coach in the NFL coming, now after this season. Obviously swapping out the Harbaugh brothers as the head coach and sort of his coaching evolution. Yeah, it's an obviously great story, and I love John Harbaugh is probably a Hall of Fame NFL head coach at this point, being able to go from a Joe Flacco, who is a completely different quarterback than Lamar Jackson, who's now going to win 2 MVPs. They've been able to stay the course with him as well. The other part that's important too, and I think this sort of is an interesting talking point coming off of the Bill Belichick one as well, where massaging that personal relationship too. Lamar Jackson's situation this offseason was not the cleanest one. Him asking for a trade, them getting the franchise tag, them getting the long-term deal with him. Now he's the MVP of the league. Now they're the favorite to come out of the AFC. All of those personal things are not trivial either. And then you look at Michigan, him having the suspension, his entire players, whenever they interview his players after the games, they're saying, I could never do it without my coach. That's not, we talk about these wonderkids, the Mike McDaniels, the Brian or the Ben Johnsons, all of those. That's awesome. And I love the strategies. But sometimes it's all about the players who want to play. You want to play for, right? Like your guy Sam Weish, all those other. There's an element of I just really want to play for this coach, and I think both Harbaughs have that in spades. So that's really I think a hugely important part of being a great coach in football.
I've been around both of them. There's no doubt that there's a tremendous buy-in from the players that they coach, and the way that they handle the moments of crises that could go in a bad way with other coaches, quarterback not getting the contract that he wanted, but still able to massage that and keep them really understanding that, no, we're building this around you. We just went and got you the offensive coordinator that's getting ready to take your game to the next level. And clearly he's on the precipice of winning yet his second MVP award, Lamar Jackson with the Baltimore Ravens. One final question before we let you out of here. Who would you consider amongst the maybe most dangerous teams that maybe didn't win their division? It's going to come in as a wild card, whether they're an NFC team or an AFC team. The most dangerous as we enter the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everybody would say Buffalo, but honestly, if Buffalo doesn't win their division, they might not make the playoffs. I think that, if Jacksonville and Pittsburgh win and Buffalo doesn't win, they're not going to. So I'm actually going to say the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams have a Super Bowl quarterback in Stafford, a Super Bowl head coach in McVay, one of the best running backs in the NFL in Kyren Williams, and 2 really good wide receivers, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. That team, everybody had them written off going into the year.
Yes.
Everybody had talked about, this is a rebuilding season. The party's over, including me. It is. Sean McVay will not win Coach of the Year. I think Kevin Stefanski will and has deserved it. But Sean McVay has done the most impressive coaching job in the NFL this year, other than Kevin Stefanski. And I think that they are dangerous in the playoffs.
Everyone wanted to see them fail after they given away all of their draft picks. They went all in on Odell Beckham Jr. and getting all these players, even when they made the move to bring over Stafford. It looked like they had mortgaged the future. But I always said that draft picks aren't worth gold unless you tell me who you took with that pick, right? Tell me who you're taking. Now, if you take the right guy, then I'll say, okay, that was worth a whole heck of a lot. They seemingly, even without those picks, right, some mid-level picks, been able to turn it around. You talked about it, Kyren Williams coming in from Notre Dame, and then Puka Nacua, the way that these guys have paid off. It really is making Les Snead and their head coach, Sean McVay, look like they have the Midas touch because they've been able to retool and rebuild rather quickly. Eric, great show. We appreciate you coming on with us. Always great talking with you, my friend. Again, we want everyone to know they can go to SoomerSports.com. They can also listen to you and former Atlanta Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff by tuning in to the Soomer Sports Show. Where can they find that show, by the way? Soomer Sports Show.
YouTube, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcast. We'll have to have you on. I can't wait to see you at the Super Bowl, Solly.
We will see you there and love to join you on the show. Thanks again for joining us right here on the Believe in Bengals podcast, right here on Bally Sports Ohio. He is Dr. Eric Eager, Soomer Sports Vice President. I'm Solomon Wilcots. We'll see you next time, everyone.